Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Narrative Timbre. My name is Chris Morgan, and I am pleased to introduce as my first guest, Amanda Bocchi. She's a composer and a musician from Roanoke, Virginia, and we met her a couple years ago at Podcast Movement, and life's been getting in the way, but finally we got you as a guest on our show, and I'm really happy to see you, and I know the guys are going to be really happy to see this, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Just to kind of, just to get the ball rolling, you started playing guitar at 9. You've been both classically trained and trained in jazz. And I know we did talk a little bit about your experiences. And just to start off, like, what got you playing the guitar at 9? And was there a record, or was there a toy guitar you just picked up? I'm just really curious as to what was the spark.
Okay. My biological father told me he was a country singer when I was a little kid, and like that he was on the radio and stuff. And so I started learning guitar because he played guitar, or so he said. And so I wanted to play to, try to like create some kind of connection between him and myself. And I stuck with the guitar. However, the relationship never came to fruition. But before that, I started writing songs, I think, from the time I was 6. I've always written songs. It was just either on piano or guitar. Guitar was just the first instrument I kind of dove into.
Nice. So when you, into going, I'm going to start over again. Going through high school and into college, where I believe you started off learning classical guitar and then moved to jazz, or do I have that reversed?
That's actually backwards. Yeah, I started out in jazz. I went to Kennesaw State University in Georgia, and I originally tried to major in performance and jazz. I was in the jazz guitar department. And then when I transferred to Hollins University, that's when they didn't have a jazz department. So I learned classical instead, and that's what I ended up graduating with.
Fantastic. And since then, basically since then you've been a working musician. I hate to use that term because as far as I'm concerned, if you're sitting here practicing every day, no matter where you are, you're a working musician.
Well, if you're playing by yourself in your bedroom and no one hears you, then you're working, but do you make money? I guess.
Literally falling on deaf ears. So about your songwriting process, because I'm really interested in this. You seem to, I think you said you like to use a lot of 6 chords, and my whole point is, I guess, when you start the song, do you find yourself drawing more from jazz? Do you find yourself drawing from classical? Does it depend upon where what you're trying to convey? I don't know if you start with the music or if you start with the lyrics first. I'm just really interested in your songwriting process.
Sure. So as Tom Waits said, like some songs come to you differently. Some songs sneak up on you, and some, you have to threaten to come out. So for some songs, I do start with lyrics, or I start with a concept. A lot of times if I'm trying to communicate something certain, like a certain type of emotion, like each chord to me has a feeling or has an emotion. So if I want something warm and dirty, I'm going to use like a minor 6 chord, and I'll just show you what that is right now. So like if I want something warm and dirty, like this to me is that, here, maybe you can see my guitar now. This to me
Cool.
is my, that warm and dirty chord. And say I'm looking for something, you know, melancholy. To me, the major 7 shape just lends itself to melancholy, and it can also be kind of happy, but it's this interval right here, the 1 to the natural 7, that makes it have just this really nice quality that I like for that feeling. And then, of course, you know, there's certain inversions that sound really nice with that too, that you can kind of explore. So each chord has a feeling, but then sometimes it's more about rhythm or groove that kind of pulls me into something, or I'll have a melody for a long time in my head before I find it on the guitar, figure out what supports it. So it happens a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now, the using the E major 7 chord was such a great example, because it does that. For some reason, that chord in particular does have that happy warmth, but there's like an underlying melancholy to it. You know, that is just such, when you, God, I don't want to get too technical right off the bat, but I know voicing piano, when I have like when I have like say a 7th chord, I have a tendency to want to voice the root and the like I'll put the 7th and then I hit the root. So you've got that slight
Yeah.
and you got that slight dissonance, and then I like to put the 3rd on top of that. So I mean, just out of curiosity, I don't know really off the top of my head how to translate that to guitar, because if I try to do that, I'm sitting there all day trying to figure it out. Like when you construct chords on guitar, like what intervals are your favorites? I know this is going to sound super geeky, but
The major 7 really is like this really is really nice to me. And I feel like, and that's the same major 7 that we were talking about. So 1 3 5 sa 5 3 1. So those 2 are really nice. I tend to space out the root and the 7, just because I feel like sometimes the quality or the essence of the chord is more present when there's a little more space in it. So I'll kind of even, you know, like on the very low end, have my root and kind of like space out the chord so that I've got, you know, 2, maybe a 1 5 in the left, and then, you know, hit the 7 and 3 and 1 in the right, pretty far apart. But on guitar, I mean, you can play anything you want, and you can find anything you want, and anything is possible. You just have to count it out, you know?
do you have a tendency to finger pick or play with a pick? I mean, what's your style like?
I typically just finger pick. Yeah. Unless I really need one, there's a few songs where I'm doing like, you know, power chords or whatever, and I kind of like to use a pick then.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is because when, you know, finger picking, I just started relearning that, and I realized when you do have like these more complex chords, it's easier to make them ring. And considering, I mean, I know last week we precast, we had talked about chord voicings, and it's, you know, when you finger pick, there really is a way to accentuate
Oh, sure. Yeah. So
more
like,
so more so.
yeah. So like I have a lot more control than I would with a pick. Plus I can roll. Yeah, so like right there, I have a lot more control if I'm using my hand instead of a pick. I wouldn't be able to express it like that with a pick.
I kind of figured, given the things, but that was lovely. Lyrically, do you I know a lot of your songs are personal, and like if you look at somebody like Robert Hunter for the one of the lyricists for the Grateful Dead, he'd always write stories third person. I know Tori Amos, she'll write more personal stuff, but she kind of creates characters. I mean, is there, when you, generally speaking, when you write lyrics, is there any kind of disconnect? I mean, is your first person really you, or is it like a character you create that's your avatar, or is it like you let what the subject matter is dictate?
All of the above. I have
Okay.
songs about uh, people who are transgender. I'm not transgender. I sing it in the first person. I have songs about murderers. I'm also not a murderer, but I sing it in the first person. So sometimes it's a character, and sometimes it really is me that I'm talking about. And sometimes I'll talk about myself in character form, which is a little bit easier. Like some of the subject matter that's a little harder for me to talk about, I'll typically put in the voice of the character. Or just you, not even really in the voice of a character. I would just, change the pronouns from I to she or her,
All right, cool. Because yeah, that's one thing I always interests me, because as somebody who's not an awesome lyricist, I always was interested, when I was doing that, like the approaches people would take, and so like I don't know how to ask this. I know there's a lot of personal stuff that you've gone into, like addiction, that you've gone over 100 times in interviews. But is there another? Is there any like reoccurring themes that you do seem to go back to, or is it? I know I'm asking very general stuff, but
Murder.
murder. All
Big,
right. What inspired you to write a song about a murderer?
I have several songs about murderers.
Really?
I have a bunch. What inspired me? I was obsessed with true crime, like every other white bitch out there. And I mean, but honestly, before the whole craze on Netflix. So, like when I was 18, 17, 18, I got really into true crime, read a lot of true crime novels, watched a lot of court TV, and like the Phil Spector trial. I love murder trials. I love watching them. Uh, so I think that kind of inspired things.
Your song, Black Widow.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that song about then?
Okay. Black Widow is a song about discovering. Okay, there's a few characters. So the Black Widow, a woman who murders her husbands and then moves around to a different man to kill. Uh, she is the character who gets murdered in this story, and she gets murdered by a woman who discovers that the Black Widow is chasing after her man. So she figures it out, and she kidnaps the Black Widow and murders her in her basement. And yeah, that's the story. Then she gets her man back, but then her man's like sad because this other, bitch has died. And so she's at the end, she's very frustrated. She's like, the tramp is gone. I stole her thunder, but you can't pin a thing on me. And so, that's how it ends.
It's it's kind of like I have no other analogy for that. That is awesome. All right, now that we're on the subject of Black Widow, and please cut me off if you don't want to. I know that you did go to LA and try to record it,
I did record.
and I know there's only so much you really can talk about, but like with regard to, I know there's having listened to both. Uh, as we know, like the way you write, the instruments you choose, the chords you choose, whatever, are part of the whole picture. Um, how did the picture change when you like introduce like a producer or an engineer that's not you, that's looking, you're looking at a third person from one side of the mirror, they're
Mhm.
looking at the story from another side of the mirror. How does it change when others interpret your song? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Black Widow. I mean, how does it change when you do work with other people?
That was my first experience with a true producer. So, what changed is the amount of control I had, or the amount of input I had. Um, like a lot of my music has extended harmony. It's not exactly jazz. It kind of fits into like a neo soul fusion type of thing because I've got the goal and the sound I'm aiming for is like hip hop beats behind these, extended harmonies that meld together to create just this unique sound. And they just kind of took out like a lot of the parts of the chord that I thought made it cool. Like,
So they really told you.
it was dumbed down a little bit. They simplified it. They created a chorus where there had not been a chorus, which was merited, but then or warranted rather. But then wrote this bridge in like 20 minutes, and I sang this part that just, it's nothing I would have ever written. It's nothing I would write. It was intended to kind of fit a prescribed, radio friendly format. So, and it did do that.
I mean, so they literally went in and reconstructed like the chords you were actually playing.
Yeah.
So, oh wow,
Yeah.
okay, so that definitely does change the flavor a lot of the song. Um,
Yeah. I mean, we took out half the song and kept like four chords, but then took out parts of the chords. So it was like, I mean, it was the shell. And then it was, what was amazing about that experience was that, he heard something that I couldn't have imagined because I've not worked in that capacity before. And it transformed it, and it was totally different than anything I personally would have created. But I was also in a position to want to do that, in some capacity. It was a good learning experience.
and if you can't answer this, please don't. This is on the album that you are and have been working on. With this song, which version are you going to put on, or are you going to put both versions on?
I'm not putting either version on.
Really?
Really. I'm gonna hold off on piano stuff. I have the songs that I'm gonna use, and I didn't dig too far into the piano stuff because I'm gonna just continue to put out like 5 or 6 song EPs every 6 months or so. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, I've got easily 3 to 4 albums worth of material that just hasn't been released or recorded really outside of live performances.
So that's right, but because how much, I mean, because I know your primary instrument is guitar. I mean, we went to see you at Podcast Movement. As I told you before, I was delirious because I hadn't basically slept in, and Ian pulled me aside. He's like, "You gotta see this band," and I came in, and you guys were playing "What I Got," which again comes to your hip hop thing, and
Yeah.
which is really sharp the way you guys pulled it together. But I also did notice that you jumped on the piano. Did you start learning, was piano something you learned in college? Is it something you taught yourself? And to what, and I know your guitar is your main instrument, but to what extent do you, when you practice or when you write, when does the keyboard really call you?
Oh, all the time.
Does it?
Yeah, the keyboard is by far the best instrument to write on, in my opinion. I mean, as far as theory goes, if you want to understand theory, just practice it on a piano, because the scales are laid out in order. It's not
And
like,
there's only one middle C, not five.
right. Well, exactly. It's the guitar is a lot more complicated, in my opinion, when it comes to writing. If you're doing like composition and you're trying to implement theory, I'm just not, and I know that there's plenty of guitar players who are at that level. For me, it's easier to look at the piano if I'm trying to, you know, teach somebody how to build a half diminished chord. I probably would go to the guitar last. I would say, if you're in C flat the third, flat the fifth, flat the seven, and you can have if you know how to spell chords, then you can just play it on a piano. You don't need any kind of special training. But to answer your question, I learned in college in a class piano, and everyone has to learn piano in school.
Yeah.
You go to school for music, and it just became so easy and expressive, and I could let go a little bit more, because it's just the same scale repeated over and over, all the way up the piano.
Right. When you took piano in college, did you I have two questions to ask, and answer them in any order you want.
Okay.
When you write songs, do you tend to go to the piano and transpose it to guitar, or does it, is it, again, depending on the song, where you may start on piano and be like, no, this song's calling a guitar, and then to backtrack, when you studied in college, did you start off, or would you say your training's more classical, jazz, or a combination?
You're on piano?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely not classical, hardly jazz. Like I'm functional. I'm a functional piano player. I apply jazz theory, if you will. I like playing piano. I can get around on it because I know enough theory to kind of move around and stuff. But as far as being like a true anything, no, I'm just a hack.
Okay. Because yeah, when I was in college, like I could do the romantic stuff. I could do some. I'm like I said, I'm not really a classical pianist, but I liked Chopin because you have a lot of leeway on them. But when it came to jazz, I mean, vamps, or if they asked me to do any comping, I stuck to the Dorian. I didn't really move too much because it was just the next step up, and it's so I agree with you. I was just curious because as somebody going to college, there's a lot of pressure on getting stuff right. And I will never play Bach again. Never try to play
No,
Bach.
I mean, I can comp on piano because that's easy.
Yeah,
If you can look at a chart and spell a chord, then you can play it on a piano.
yeah,
So that's okay. Like, as far as being Thelonious Monk, or like really really being able to, like, I write songs on it, and that's how I use it, and I enjoy it for that. But yeah.
yeah. There is a freedom when you look at a chord chart and you're just able to vamp. That is just to me, I love that. That's one of the things I love about jazz. I'm not gonna pretend I'm a jazz artist. I can vamp. I can.
I won't either. I won't pretend either.
When we your band now, sorry, I'm just tempted to go back into college stories. Your band now, you said you were working with Soul Food, the incarnation of Soul Food you're working with now.
Soul flood.
Sorry?
It's a soul flood.
Soul Flood. Did I see the English language, and I don't,
People want to say soul food. It's not
Soul
soul. I
Flood.
mean, it's a soul flood. It's a flood of emotions. It's intended to be like incredibly dynamic. You know, shift start shifts between tempo and rhythm and that kind of thing, that kind of like jolt you into a flood of emotions, plus the personal nature of the music. So that's just a description.
Because I know right now you said you were working with a hip hop drummer.
Yeah.
I can't read it. I wrote it in pencil. Is it Jamie?
Justin Devia.
Justin? Okay. And then the other band member is Christine?
Her name is Catherine
Catherine.
Backus. Yeah,
I'm sorry, what was her name again?
Catherine Backus, and she's a trumpet player, guitar player, and she's my bass player. So she's switched between several instruments, and she's her own amazing artist as Catherine the Great. She's a folk artist, and that's her name.
Oh, awesome.
She's really
Have,
cool.
all right, so this album or EP that you're working on, are you recording with the two of them right now?
Well, we were right before the pandemic hit, and
Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, I mean, the album release was intended to be May 16th, and now it's been pushed back to, um, God knows when we're allowed to have people in a room.
Yeah.
It might end up just having to be an internet release if we're stuck in this position for long enough.
Well, I'm just gonna say right off the record, let us know what it is and we'll promote it, to the extent that we can. We'd be happy to. Um, do you have something coming on? I meant to ask you this before. Is there something on the internet you're doing? If not this Sunday, is it a week from?
Yeah, I'm playing at Spot on Kirk, and that's actually where the album release was going to be. So it'll be a live stream show. Catherine's going to back me up on trumpet, mandolin, and guitar, and I'm going to do an acoustic duo event. I can't bring the whole band because we got to be 6 feet apart, and the stage is
Right.
only big. But yeah,
And what date is that going to be?
that is May 31st on Sunday at 7 o'clock.
Okay, so I did get it right. All right, so it's May
Yeah.
31st at 7 o'clock. We'll make sure to post it on our social media too.
Awesome.
And I can tell you right now, the four of us will be watching it separately, but we will be watching it.
Okay, cool.
When you like, speaking of classical music, I mean, a lot of times, as we talk precast, there's always parameters. Like Bach is basically very you there's no room for interpretation unless you're amazing. But with other styles, there is a little room for interpretation with regard to tempo, with regard to dynamics. When you write a song and you get somebody like Justin and Catherine in there, how does the song change? Like, I know you. I mean, as a composer, you have an idea of how you want the song to go, but other people come into it and they bring their own flavors. Like, how do you negotiate that? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Well, Catherine is very much a pro, and so she wants to know what I want, and uh, and so I tell her, and same. And with Justin, um, if there's something specifically I'm looking for, like a beat, I'll usually beatbox it to him, or I'll try to. And usually I do have an idea for what I'm looking for. So typically I do beatbox it to him, and then there might be some slight, fluctuations in how he chooses to express it as it comes up. But usually, like, the beat is the central focus of the music. So the rhythms are intended to change in a very specific way. So I'm pretty deliberate about that when I'm communicating. And with Catherine, I mean, everyone has freedom to bring themselves to the table because that's what music is. Right. But I think that the difference with this band is that the ego, as far as like, well, I want to play my part how I want to play my part, isn't really happening because they recognize that they're supporting me versus them getting to get out whatever it is that they need to. And everyone has multiple bands, so.
Right. It's kind of like the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, Catherine, when I played with Catherine on her release, I wanted to know what she wanted, because as a player, you want to support the artist. You want to create their vision. So they're both great about asking me what I want, and typically, especially in this band, that's been the case. In the past, that's not the case, and there's been egos, and like, this is my part, or the thing I came up with is better, and people want to play like solo the whole time, and that's not how you serve a song best. So I think that the attitude has shifted from I want to show off with the band I had previous to this one to I want to serve the song, which is ideal.
Is there how have the, like you said, you've got like several EPs worth of material, several albums worth of material. Is there anything with this, because the band you're working with now, is there anything that you've like jettisoned, or is there anything that you're like, hey, I'm going to re-record because I like
Hell yeah, I re-recorded a bunch of stuff. Yes, sir, I did. The majority of it. If I could re-record all of it, I would.
And how long has this been? How long has this incarnation been around?
This exact version of the band since
Yes. Since what?
January.
January. Okay. So really, you guys, it sounds like, based on what it sounds like, given that it was a very short time between January and the lockdown, it sounded like you guys hit the groove, like you really hit the ground running.
I had to build a band in 3 weeks. Okay. My this is too personal. So my ex was also the bass player, and we broke up in November. So we had all these plans for December. Anyway, him and the drummer ghosted me and then quit in a message. And mind you, me and the bass player share children, and I got my band broken up via Messenger, and yeah, it was just it was a good thing to have happen. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Because, as talented as he was, the bass player, Catherine came in and learned every single one of his licks in less than a week. Every single one. She's a badass. And then Justin came in and listened and cared and played what I wanted. And so it came together in 3 weeks.
Wow, that is fantastic. That is not any kind of patronage when I say, wow.
We had shows booked, and
Yeah.
I guess I could have kept them on and had that be super uncomfortable. And instead, like, I'm not kidding, within 3 days, I had a full band and we were ready. We were practicing and we had to learn 3 hours worth of material. That's a lot of songs.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And we had a 3-hour gig, I think, 3 weeks later.
Yeah, it is. I had to do that once when I was doing rhythm guitar for this thing. I had to learn the rhythm for 30 songs, which is just basically modified strumming, maybe a little picking. But to actually get in and learn 3 original, because this is for a bar band, it was all covers. But learn these original pieces and actually to be working with the artist to prepare. So in every way, shape, and form, you're starting from scratch. Yeah, it's not like there's anything like, hey, listen to these songs, listen to the way this person does it. It's like, no. We're clean slate here. We're coming up with, you've got 3 weeks to learn 3 hours of material. That is amazing.
Yeah, I love my team. I have the best team, and I'm proud of our people, and they're professional, and they're just great. I couldn't be prouder of who I have working with me now.
I am so looking forward to seeing you and Catherine work together a week from Sunday, May 31st at 7 p.m. If 2020. So if you're listening to this afterwards, hopefully it's recorded and still floating around on the internet. To kind of switch gears, and you can add and subtract as much as possible. We were talking about, especially with regard to college and certain other experiences. Being a woman in this business, I am not even going to pretend I even have the slightest inkling of what that's like. And I knew you were sharing some stories, and I know this is something that, it's extremely important. And, it's 2020, and there's still so much out there, you know. And I know we talked about other
You
artists.
mean sexism? You mean sexism? Is that
Yeah, I'm not trying to get too much, but
what you don't say?
it was, no, it was something we touched. Right. It was something we touched on. And as I said to you before, listening to seeing a documentary on Kate Bush, and if it weren't for like David Gilmour really pushing, she wouldn't have been heard and been able to do things her way. You know, flash forward 12 years later, maybe 15 years later, Tori Amos basically had to, you know, was told, oh, your album's great. We're going to switch everything to guitar. And she's like, I'm going to walk, you know. And it's just like, okay, there was a big switch in those 15 years. And besides the fact, you know, Kate Bush inspired so many musicians regardless of gender. So there was that push, but still there's even more. Like, because if you look at like somebody like Lady Gaga, who is an incredible musician, and I know she likes doing things, but I mean, there's some stuff she does commercially that's going to sell, like you were talking about before, with regard to getting into the pop culture. And I know that she, under her um, real name, does basically
Stephanie
smaller.
Germanotta. Yeah.
Sorry,
Stephanie Germanotta. That's her
Stephanie
name.
Germanotta, where she's playing smaller clubs. It's her on the piano.
Yeah.
So I know that even now where women do have more control of their careers, there are certain paths that they're guided to by the industry. And we, again, I didn't want to get too political, but this was a subject we did spend some time on in our pre-interview. And I really want you to, as
Oh,
much as you can share.
I wouldn't consider this political. I would consider it human rights, you know. So being treated differently because you're black or because you're a woman or because you're from a different country, I mean, all of that is you know, wrong, right? We can all
Right.
kind of agree on that. But prejudice exists, and as a kid, when I was coming up, there weren't a whole lot of female guitar heroes. So I think I might have been one of the only females taking lessons in this Metro Atlanta store that I took lessons at, and was definitely the only female I knew who majored in guitar. And then I ended up going to an all-female college. I think I might have been the second to ever graduate with a degree in classical guitar from Hollins, if I'm correct. So it's like a pretty narrow field. But in my experience, and I don't experience this a whole lot anymore, but definitely when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, late teens, and I would go play, because I've been performing since I was 14 or 15 years old. So I've been in a lot of bars for a long time, and you know, a lot of open mics and put at the end of lists purely just for being female. Or, you know, guys who think that they're, you know, have a pedal board with like 80 pedals on it and they think they're like so awesome, and they come to open mic night with all 80 of their pedals, and you know, you're like, hey man, can I see your guitar? And they're like, I'm sorry, are you a female? Because according to what I've learned in life, you're not capable of doing things. And really, if you have 80 pedals, then you probably suck anyway.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know 5 people that I could think off the top of my hands when I was doing it like
Exactly.
that.
Are they wannabes? Or are they great?
Oh, can I see your guitar? No, I don't know, man. How oily is your skin? Or
What am I gonna do to your guitar? Like, or being asked, you know, like guys would quiz me, like, okay, well then, how do you build a diminished chord if you know stuff? And I would tell them how to build a diminished chord. And I mean, it's just to have to qualify my ability strictly for being female sucks. However, I will say in the last decade, that's changed dramatically. As much as I despise T Swizzle, when she came on the scene, I got a ton of female guitar students, and you know who I mean by T Swizzle, right? Taylor Swift.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Swizzle.
I'm a little removed from pop culture, so like it's like it's my old man and me showing. It's just like, what are you kids listening to nowadays?
What do you
I
mean?
mean, I mean, like literally a couple years, and this is like how I saw on Graham Norton's show. I saw Saint Vincent, and she just blew me away. And she's one of these artists that came out, fantastic guitarist that you can kind of. She sounded familiar but different, and I'm like, it kind of got me back into pop music, like listening to like even Sia, like Sia, um, uh, uh, Rihanna, and I know like Sia and Lady Gaga, they write a lot or have part so much in
Oh yeah, yeah,
whatever people write. So it was like, okay, so like now I'm like, oh, so like so now I'm learning, who everybody is in pop. So T Swizzle, I'm like, no, I have no idea.
well, that's a really old, outdated name, so don't go around saying it.
Oh
But
no.
my whole point is that once, I mean, honestly, I saw a dramatic change when she came on the scene. I've been teaching guitar for like 16 years now, and so since she kind of came on the scene, I started getting a bunch of little guitar students, and I've just seen it explode. Females in music in general, because the only person I used to be compared to was Jewel, and now there's like thousands of women and tons of heroes, and it doesn't even have to be on guitar. Just there's lots of female songwriters out right now that are making incredible music. And finally, the guitar industry figured out that females are also buying like 50% of all the guitars. So Fender's actually started targeting us just a little bit. Now the guitar magazines need to catch up, but they're, it's just a thing.
Yeah, and that's that actually like that St. Vincent Music Man blocking the actually has a guitar, her signature guitar. She called it the gender inclusive because it's positioned to count for the female anatomy more. And I'm saying that because a lot of guitarists, well, we were talking about it now, how a lot of guys play their guitar, where they play it down or where they
Oh
play it
yeah,
up.
yeah,
But she wanted something where it would account for more, the general female form. So if you were more of a,
you mean like this?
yeah. So if you've got
That's
like,
what this is built for. I tell all my girls, I'm like, this is your boob spot. That's what that's for. The guitar was made for. It was primarily a female instrument for a long time. It was one of the only instruments we were allowed to play that they wouldn't take from us, because it, like horns and stuff made us look bad when we would play them. They didn't want us to look like, disturbed in the face or anything. So like guitars were okay, pianos were okay.
well, I didn't want to say it. So in other words, like, is that why they created the dreadnought guitar? And for anybody who doesn't know the guitar, if you're listening to this, Amanda's playing a concert, more of a concert acoustic, where it's more curved. It's more of like an hourglass shape, whereas the dreadnought's kind of more like a
Square body.
yeah, it's more of a oh god, trapezoidal shape.
Mm-hmm.
As so, is that something I guess guys invented to make sure they had an acoustic guitar that was just their own?
No, guys invented everything.
As a
I mean, as long as y'all wrote the history books, like y'all made everything basically.
well, I try to use my heterosexual white male privilege for good. Be like, hey, you know what? I'm not qualified to speak about this. Let's have somebody who is qualified to speak
Hey,
about
there you
this.
go. No, same. I mean, who am I?
Well, hey, my mom raised me right. That's I thank my mom so much for being the as far as my parents go, being the biggest influence, because and I'm loath to use this term, but as woke or progressive as I thought I was, my wife, my mom would sometimes correct me. I have a lot of
Yeah, that's what they're there for.
yeah, I have a lot of friends in various communities who are like, yeah, Chris, but no, don't. say that or don't put it in that form, or because I know like on YouTube, because right now we're recording a video, and I know that a lot of women on YouTube, there you guys get criticized more than we do. I mean, you know, your voices, you've got there's a look you've got to have. Because I know women get, I mean, the internet's a pretty, I'm not going to get into all the different machinations of trolling, but I do know that women are critiqued, as with all things, differently than men. And so, you know, I don't know where I'm going with this.
That's
I
okay.
guess I guess I'm trying to back up your point to a lot of the.
That's all you have to say. Would you, so I only have about 10 more minutes. Would you like me to play any songs? This is a song called Fault Line. This is a brand new one. Your fault is a fault line and it runs straight through your name. Separating the I from the A. My fault is I fell in love with someone who don't feel the same. My fault is I fell in love with someone who don't feel no shame. Yo, I'm that bitch. Keep from the past. You don't pull forward 'cause you ain't got the gas. Yo, I'm that bitch. You keep in the distance. Every time you call, I'll take care of your wish list. Didn't mean a thing. It didn't mean a thing. It didn't mean nothing. Didn't mean a thing. We didn't mean a thing. Didn't mean nothing. I'm that bitch. You keep dead last. Only call me if you're sick. If you wanna get some ass. Yo, I'm that bitch. You keep in the distance. Every time you call, I'll take care of your wish list. Didn't mean a thing. It 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 didn't mean a thing. You better call Tyrone. Tell him, come on, get your shit. You better call Tyrone. But you can't use my phone.
That was awesome. That was really awesome. And if you're listening to this, I highly recommend you check out the video just to watch Amanda play guitar. I know you have to go, but Amanda, please, anytime you want, you're welcome back on the show. You know, keep us updated on what you're doing. And to remind everybody, if you're listening to this before May 31st, 2020, that Amanda Bocchi will be playing an online online concert with her multi-instrumentalist Catherine the Great backing her up.
Catherine the Great. No, Catherine Backus, yeah.
Catherine Backus. And you can follow, your website is it?
It's amandabocchi.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Amanda Bocchi. My band we're Amanda Bocchi and the Soul Flood. Flood, not food.
Flood. All right.
And, yeah.
Well, you know, you get one thing in your head and you always, I just started with you.
I've heard that so many times, and I'm like, oh, but it's a flood for your soul, but it's also food for your soul. But I feel like I think collard greens and fried chicken when I hear soul food, and
country gravy, biscuits, and mashed potatoes.
oh man.
As well as the greens. Yeah, my grandmom was from the South. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, here I am.
Do you like your greens with ham hocks or chicken stock?
Ham.
Okay.
Ham.
Okay, I've had it both ways. I know sometimes the way you looked at me, I'm like, I hope it wasn't sacrilege by saying chicken stock.
Definitely ham. Definitely ham. I've never heard of chicken stock.
Maybe it's because I don't know why, but that's why I've had it. But so yeah, if you want to come back and even talk food, that's great.
Okay, cool.
But hopefully at some point we can make it down and actually do an in the studio thing with you live. That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
We're always up for a road trip. But again, Amanda, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much showing up in the show and being our first guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you. And to everybody, thank you for tuning in, and live long and prosper.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.